Good afternoon. Well, August 16th already. Welcome to our Rotary meeting. I'd like to thank our greeters, Ryan Rushing and Ron Fulkerth, who stepped in for David Brandenburg, who's moving his granddaughter into Heidelberg today. So he texted us to look at, so I think that's a good excuse. Eric Marcus for our ticket master. Beth Handler for all the work she does over here setting everything up. I'm really glad she's here because we still waiting. Kate Bales, Mike Weinstein, and Mike Zwick for the great programs, and Jim Gundel for the website. And at this time, Danny, if you're ready, next to Jeremy come up for the invocation.
Well, good afternoon. Would you join me in prayer? So, Heavenly Father, in the midst of our busy lives, we seek your divine guidance. As Rotarians, we're entrusted with responsibility to be agents of positive change. Grant us the clarity to discern the needs of our community and the courage to take action. May your wisdom lie as we navigate the challenges that lie ahead. Amen.
Thank you, Danny. Secretary's report, Joe Jenkins.
All right, I'm a little behind. We got several guests today. Shannon, you want to go first?
I have Abby here with me today. Hey, Abby.
Pete?
I've got two meetings today. My brother Josh. Matt Mills.
Matt.
Josh and Matt and I have just started a new business called Rustic Pros of Dayton. We are a water, smoke, mold, and fire mitigation company, and Josh was leading the operation. And so I wanted to bring them both today to Rotary to talk about it, introduce them to the group. With water, smoke, mold, and fire mitigation.
Sounds like that will be $5. Now, yes, I have Beth came from the Patterson, formerly Harper Chase. That's quite some time ago. I asked her to come join us because I think it would be good for her to be a part of that. So we welcome you, Beth.
I've got a couple guests.
Oh,
Good afternoon, everybody. I've got Jeff Mann. He's our Director of Student Services. I'm sure you've met Jeff before. And then we have Tyler Alexander. He is our Director of Business.
And then I brought my wife Amanda. And then yeah, I guess that's pretty good.
hello. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Hadley. I need one. I need at least one. There we go. Thanks. Here. I just don't want you to get carried away, but we need at least one.
Already calling myself. All right, good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, our new guest, long-term guest, and our speaker / Rotarian. Today is August 16th, aka the 229th day of the year, which makes us almost 68% of the way through the year. As far as our birthdays and anniversaries, we only have one. Matt Bone will be celebrating a birthday on the 19th, along with Bill Clinton and Orville Wright. So I'm sure that'll be a great day to celebrate. As far as some good things that happened today in history, going all the way back to 1858, the first transatlantic telegraph cable was inaugurated by U.S. President Buchanan, who exchanged greetings with UK's Queen Victoria. This time, I'm sad Brian is not here. In 1926, the Migratory Bird Treaty was signed between the USA and Canada. It now protects over 800 different species of birds, which I think Brandon could name all 800 if we asked him. 1954, Sports Illustrated was published for the first time by Time. 1960, Air Force Captain Joe Kittinger parachuted from space after climbing into a balloon up to 102,800 feet, or about 19 miles. During his jump, set 4 historic records, one for highest parachute jump, highest balloon ascent, longest free fall, which is 4 minutes, and fastest speed by a human without an aircraft of 416 miles per hour. All of those records I will not ever be attempting in my life. So, but even more notably is, looks like I chopped off here, but he was also a prisoner of war who was captured doing parachuting jumps over in the enemy territory. So former POW turned world record holder. In 1962, a guy by the name of Pete Best got replaced by another guy by the name of Ringo Starr to become the drummer of the Beatles. And if you love a good Beatles tribute, the Yellow Cab Tavern will have its 6th annual Come Together show tonight and tomorrow starting at 6 p.m. Moving on to some fun things to celebrate. Today is National Telejoke Day. It's also National Airborne Day, which probably ties into Captain King during his record-setting jump. We also have what could be a popular day amongst us. It's National Rum Day. So pop quiz, what was Forrest Gump's favorite drink? Rum, Forrest, rum. Thank you. It's also National Roller Coaster Day, which commemorates the first vertical loop roller coaster in 1989. I would not be going on a roller coaster in 1989 or 1889, but that's just me. Tomorrow is one of my favorite days, Pineapple Juice Day, on Nonprofit Day, and National Black Cat Appreciation Day, which doesn't make sense. Going on Saturday, mail catalog day. And I think a few of us in here remember getting the East Bay catalog back in the day and circling all of our basketball shoes and athletic apparel that we never got from our parents. And it's also National Bad Poetry Day. So I actually, for Sunday, I was trying to write a poem about my recent unemployment, but unfortunately that also did not work out. Monday, we got National Aviation Day. Tuesday, Radio Day, along with International Pizza Day. Wednesday is National Poetry Day, which got a question for everyone. Does anyone know how a poet sneezes? They say haiku. And then Thursday is National Tooth Fairy Day. If you're looking for some things to do, not much going on today. So that means on your way out of here, you can check out the Beavercreek Chamber's most recent podcast that features our very own Pete Lambert. Tomorrow we have Dayton Cars and Coffee down at Austin Landing from 8 to 11, followed by the Fairborn Sweet Corn Festival 11 to 7.
That's a jam.
Also from 11 to 7, Springfield Rotary will have a 10th annual food truck competition, where those proceeds will go into their various projects, including services for people with developmental disabilities, Polio Plus, and their international projects. So if you have the time, want to drive for them, definitely do so. Sad Brandenburg's not here, but for a good reason. But you might be able to catch him tomorrow down at Young's Jersey Dairy, where they are having the 4th annual Jeep Lifestyle Annual Cruising. Buckeye Harley Davidson is also doing a classic bike and car show. We have the Great American, not Great American Ballpark, State Air Ballpark is doing a Great American Beer Tasting. Starting at 12:30, and for all of us non-drinkers or designated drivers, for $15, you can partake in getting samples of non-alcoholic beverages, including free pop, along with some raffle tickets, a pint glass, and access to the games activities on the field. Sunday, for those who enjoy classic rock, which this sounds weird because I kind of grew up listening to them, the Gin Blossoms and Toe the Wet Sprocket will be at the Rose. Monday, if you are not busy around lunchtime, the Dayton Rotary will have the legend of the Governor Mike DeWine as their speaker at noon down at Sinclair. Tuesday, the Greene County Parks and Trails are putting on a bubble party for all kids of all ages, and it's free to the public. And then moving on to Thursday, Toy Story trivia at Wings, starting at 7:30. If you missed it earlier this week, Disney and Marvel and all the big companies released movies and things that are coming up in the near future and not so near future. One of them being Toy Story 5. That'll be coming out in 2026. To make us all feel the first one came out 30 years ago. But in this one, with it being new and tackling current events, the toys that we have grown up to love in the movies will be going against modern electronic toys that kids play. So it should be a good one. They also announced Moana 2, Snow White, live action version of Snow White, Incredibles 3, Frozen 3, sorry, a sequel to Zootopia, a Fantastic Four movie, another Avatar. They're bringing back the old Freaky Friday for a sequel, and then most importantly, they are doing for the first time a live action version of Lilo and Stitch. So I will, as soon as those tickets become available, will definitely be buying some of those. Now that the Olympics are over, I want to just kind of end it with some awesomeness that happened that we may not have talked about already. So we got Botswana, who won their first ever gold medal in the men's 200 meter when Leslie Tobago upset our Noah Lyles. Also, St. Lucia won their first ever medal when Julian Alfred upset our Shikari Richardson to win 100 meter gold. We also had the first woman from Dominican Republic winning the first gold medal and also set a new Olympic record in the 400 meter hurdles while doing so. Dominica won their first medal ever when Tia Lafon won the gold in the women's triple jump. Some other notable facts: the women's 4x4 relay. Ireland made history as the first team to break the 3-minute 20-second mark and not win a medal. The winning time was 3 minutes 15 seconds. For the first time in history in the men's 100 meter, a sub 10-second time was not fast enough to make it to the finals. And it was the first time all 8 men in the finals ran under 10 seconds. If you haven't seen the photo finish, Noah Lyles won with a 9.784. Beating out second place, who ran a 9.789. Last place ran a 9.91. This is also the first time in women's 400 meter that all women run under 50 seconds, and the top 3 go under 49 seconds. So for comparison, when I was in my prime and I ran the 400 meter race, to start off, I had no idea that there was a pace and a method of running the race. I thought it was all out sprint. So I did achieve my goal of running under a minute, but I also paid the cost of losing everything that I ate that morning. Which is why you will never ever see me run a 400 in my life. I also mentioned last week we had from the US a 16-year-old that would be the youngest male in track and field for US. He put out a tweet earlier in the week that said, "Dang, I really got to go to school in 2.5 weeks," along with a picture of him in his gold medal. So I cannot imagine what it'd be like to be a 16-year-old going back to school with a gold medal.
Pretty cool.
Very, very cool. And then lastly, we dominated the Olympics, right? By having the most total medals, 126, and we won the tiebreaker with most gold medals, 40. Now there is a saying about some along the lines of power of one behind a great successful man, yada yada yada. Well, there seems to be a little bit of truth to that. If today's dream team or team team or whatever they're calling themselves. Steph Curry, his first 4 games in the Olympics, when his wife was not there, was just averaging 7 points a game and had only made 5 3-pointers. When she got there for the last 2 games, both being the medal round game and the gold medal game, he started averaging 30 points a game and made 17 3-pointers. 4 of those 3-pointers in the last couple of minutes in the gold medal game to help seal the win. So whether you believe that or not, up to you, but I think there's a little bit of truth to that. Speaking of girls playing sports, the women's individual and team for USA won a total of 59 medals for us. They also won 65% of USA's gold medals. And to break that down a little bit more, 26 of 40 gold medals, which means 65% won by the women's teams, 23 of the 44 silvers, and 18 of the 42 bronzes. So if you want to do the math, if they were to be their own country, they would have beat out the entire country of Japan, who had 20 gold medals and 45 overall. It's also, Japan finished third. So for today's finds, if you did not watch a single second of the Olympics by now, that's $1. You've been warned. If you have never seen any of the Lilo and Stitches movies, that's $1. If you have never had pineapple juice, that'll be $1. If you're not wearing your badge, that's $1. I didn't catch anybody coming in late, so Boy Scouts or Girl Scout honor, you're late at $1. And I have a deal to make with all of you. In honor of National Joke Day, if you have a go-to joke that you want to stand up and tell during Happy Bucks, that'll wipe out all your fines.
Thanks, Chris. With that, we'll go to Happy Bucks. Beth.
So my daughter turned 16 on Monday, which I'm really excited about. But she didn't work this summer, and I said, you have to get your Boy Scout rank and you need to get your driver's license. She's finished her driver's ed, and Rick's help. She finished her rank for Boy Scouts. So many congratulations. Now,
Hey,
Okay, here's my $5 obligatory plug for the business, and I'm also very happy. Thanks to Paul Watson's wonderful team of teachers. My oldest son graduated this past year, and I moved him into Ohio State this week. And so he's gonna start climbing next week. It's great. But Paul, my daughter is just a freshman, so you got 4 more years.
First of all, it was impromptu Happy Bucks for Pete not saying to me, so I say.
anyone else? Happy Bucks.
So I'll give 2 Happy Bucks. The first one is because this coming week, our daughter Emily starts school at St. Luke in 7th grade. And the second Happy Buck is because probably one of the nicest humans I've ever met. And so just proud of her.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll give it. Sorry. So I'm gonna give $20.
He's forward happy.
Well, there's a reason why. First of all, Happy Buck, get our school year started. We've got all kids under the roof today. All kids have returned. Buses are running. We've had only 1 bus accident so far, so that's pretty good. And then the other Happy Buck, which will be $19 more, is we moved my daughter into Boston College, and that's about what $1 costs in Boston College.
Used to travel most. Cheap, that's for sure. Anyone else? Not a real actor here. Looking to certainly somebody else. Something going on in your life, right?
I'll give what name we have.
Okay.
I have a happy buck that I'd be really happy if anybody that's been in this club less than 5 years and hasn't been to RLI, signs up for RLI, just say it's a check, and I'll write a club check for those $60 to pay for you to go to RLI on October the 19th.
And I recognize that. I've been through all 3 of them, and it's really good. You learn a lot there.
I have a happy buck. My brother's driving down right now from Lansing to spend the weekend with us. And my daughter's coming down from Traverse City. Wow. You also spend the weekend with us. Tomorrow we're having a huge party at the house.
Here's the time, address,
Yeah.
anyone else?
Yes.
All right, take a drawing. I'm thrilled. While we're looking at this, I have a couple of things that I want to bring up as announcements. And first, I'm going to ask Joe Jenkins to come up here and talk a little bit about the fish pantry. But the number is 169-073.
I usually, I always, but everyone thinks it's rigged.
We are looking for the Queen of Hearts. Here we go.
You got it. I did, fine pressure.
After the proceeds, we'll go to our Christmas basket program and the Black Brothers.
Hey, so last week I talked to Gail at the Green County Fish Pantry project, because I know that we're looking to do more sort of Rotary. So it is the second and the fourth Saturday of every month is when they do the veterans. And it's from 11 to 1 o'clock. So be on the lookout. Probably next week, I'll pass around a notepad for enough, so we could do more like we're probably doing the second, probably Saturday, of that month. So we'll send that out so we have all the information, and hopefully everybody can attend. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things that came out of the survey that I sent around. People wanted to do more community activities, and so I worked a little bit with Gail at the Fish Pantry, and I thought it's a worthwhile organization. They do it through the week for just people, but on Saturdays it's veterans only, which to me is a real crime that we have to have something like that, because veterans don't have the food that they need, that really bothers me. So if we can help with that, please sign up when the time comes. And then Eric, ask you to talk a little bit about something you sent out this week.
Okay, anybody should check your email. Should have gotten a message from the club. I think it had Don's name on it. I've set up in DAC various committees, and it allows you to sign up for the committees that you want to, committees that you want to serve on, not committee. So you can sign up, you just check it, and it'll sign you up for that committee. And if you want to chair a committee, some of them actually you can sign up and be the chair as well. So you can promote yourself to a position of power. So please do it, because one of the goals that we have as a board this year, and Don is leading us on it, is to get more people involved in running the club. We've got 16 something members and about 8 people that do all the work. And it would be much better if we had 75 members and 75 that did all.
Very good, thank you. And to go along with that, there's a sign-up sheet going around for the Popcorn Festival. So please sign up for a time slot so you can get that done. And then I have one more thing that I wanted to bring up. Invite a Vet is an organization that Marion, I can't remember his last name right now, started, and they're having a gala. It's called Night of Celebration, Flying Above the Clouds, to recognize vets. It's going to be September 19th at the Air Force Museum. We are going to be doing a tribute to Vietnam vets, but any vet that goes is free for them and their spouse. So I have a sheet here. I'll actually be giving a speech there. I'm not sure why they asked me, but they did. And so I'll be there. But I think we're going to honor the Vietnam vets. So if you're a Vietnam vet, please consider going, because I think that's it's really going to be a nice evening for you guys. So and any vet that's there. And also I work with another group of Blue Star families. Rick over there knows a lot about them. And they're having a block party in September. It's they do this thing every year to welcome the new airmen things into the area. We're having a brainstorming session on Monday, so I don't know a lot yet, but next week I'll probably bring some more things back. And hopefully we can get involved in that in some way, shape, or form. I kind of noticed a theme here where going in and help the vets, which I think is a great thing. So, all right. Any other announcements for the club? Yes, I'm not invited. Looking forward. It's great.
Forgot my role of students. I have the distinct pleasure of reintroducing our friend Glenn Dewar. Dr. Glenn Dewar, PhD from Cedarville. He's the chair of history and government. He is a professor of international studies, which he has shared with us a number of times, and no stranger to our club. Glenn, did you know you were here exactly 5 years ago today?
Not on the day.
And several times since, without that. Glenn's wife is Rebecca. He has three lovely children that just started school this week, if you want to talk about that. He is a soccer nut and also serves on Beavercreek City Council. Glenn?
I mean,
Well, thank you all for having me. I believe this is my seventh time speaking in front of this illustrious group, so wonderful to be with all of you. I want to thank Mike Zwick, Mark Weinstein, and Pete Bales for inviting me and for their friendship. It's been great to know all three of you for such a long time. And it really, in my travels to different parts of the world and around the United States, it's always great to see Rotary Club pop up in different areas. Just what this club does in different venues is really remarkable. When Vice Mayor Bales approached me to speak this time, we kind of came up with a generic topic, international update. And so I'm going to go with that in a few different directions, but I want to make it all. Let's see if this works.
Down, but
I'll just do it for you.
Okay, sure, David, right, thanks.
Uh-huh.
So I want to make this kind of relevant to what's happening in the United States. And so the first thing you'll see is an electoral college map. This is based on a poll of polls from 270 to win. And it just, how the electoral map is right now. And obviously we're now, as you see, 81 days away from the election. And so there's a lot that can change. There are roughly 7 swing states that are really up for grabs. A lot of states are kind of in one column, Democrats or Republicans respectively. It's not to say they're unimportant, but it's to say that you can usually draw a map this way, and as you see, the darker blue is solidly Democratic, the dark red solidly Republican. Much appreciated. Yeah. This, and so there are some states here. North Carolina is reportedly in play to some degree. You also have others where the Trump campaign is making a major push in a state like New Jersey, for example, that it could swing potentially. And so there are things like that to think through as well. Some from the Harris campaign have been talking about Florida, for example, as one that they could swing. So there's a lot that can change in the 81 days. And so I want to combine my international update with what's happening around the world. And so when it comes to foreign policy is typically a bit of an afterthought. It's not typically something that's primary as a reason to why people vote or for which way they vote. It's usually a secondary issue, as you may regularly think. The economy, jobs, those are typically the most important. And then there are a range of other major social issues that may be a reason for voting as well. But there are occasionally exceptions. We go back to 1980, for example. President Jimmy Carter at the time was embroiled in a range of different foreign policy crises, notably the hostage crisis with Iran. And it's something that really opened the door for then Governor Ronald Reagan to kind of walk through. It was a rare one as well because incumbency tends to be very powerful in the United States. Presidents typically serve a second term if they win a first term, not always, but generally that's what happened, and it interrupted Jimmy Carter's time in office. And then we have President Reagan going on to be very, very successful, winning in 1980 and then again in 1984, and remains a very, very popular president. 2004, in some ways, is also an example, even though there was a lot that's happening domestically, and Ohio was a centerpiece of a lot of what happened on the Electoral College map. Senator John Kerry tried to frame the Iraq War as a referendum on the Bush administration, so it likewise was a significant one. But these are exceptions. Typically, domestic policy is very important, but there are some signs out there this year that foreign policy could hypothetically tip the scales in one way or another. It's also interesting because with the presidency, the legacy, a lot of presidents get, run for office to try and make domestic change. But given the challenges of Congress, the Supreme Court, typically an agenda is watered down. In foreign policy, there are far fewer constraints, and this is an area where a president can really make a major legacy. And so something to bear in mind as well. The other thing we tend to see in foreign policy is the Republicans and Democrats often try to outdo one another. They try and almost leapfrog to be seen as most active on a particular circumstance or as strongest. And so it's an interesting one to watch as well. For example, if you go back 20 years ago, the Republicans had a great deal of success being viewed as much stronger, better on national security, defending the population, key tenets in the Constitution. And today, it's kind of interesting because a lot of Democrats are trying to see them show themselves as the biggest supporters of Ukraine. And so there's a bit of an interesting movement on this right now. And so major issues in the world, I'm going to focus on Ukraine and Israel today, mainly, but I always like to just, outline some of the major issues because it's a world where there is significant anarchy, there are real challenges and two major wars that are out there that the major nominees or presumptive nominees will have to try and wrestle with. Even though China isn't a direct issue right here and now, I always like to put it top of the list because if the United States and China ever get embroiled in a conflict, it is a World War III. It is the most significant issue. I think it is why I always put it as the top. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is ongoing. It doesn't look like it will end immediately, but this is interestingly where Republicans and Democrats diverge pretty significantly, especially at the top of the ticket. It's worth noting that both parties are really quite complex in how they see foreign policy, and there are significant divisions. But nonetheless, there is a big distinction between the Harris and Trump campaigns here. You also see the Israel-Hamas war. This is also ongoing. October will mark the 1-year anniversary. And sometimes when these types of conflicts get internationalized, they do tend to last a lot longer. It's worth watching there as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about ongoing nuclear programs. North Korea has not been in the news an awful lot recently, but it too is one that we always need to kind of keep an eye on. And then Iran continues to prod and to commit terrorist acts in the Middle East. And so it too, its nuclear program is worth watching. And then there are a range of different smaller issues or smaller to us issues, but some of these can really crop up and become a big deal. And so places like Bangladesh, Syria, Sudan, Myanmar, Ethiopia are all worth keeping in mind. And you might be thinking, okay, that's most of the way around the world, it's important, losing lives is a big deal, but okay, there are issues at home. And for a president, it's worth noting that having background experience is very, very important because let's go back to the last president that was probably a bona fide foreign policy expert when he entered office, and that is President George H.W. Bush. He was the director of the CIA. He had a long and extensive career in a lot of things. And one of the first things that lands on his desk, Yugoslavia. And it ended up being a hugely catastrophic conflict, very, very complicated. And one of the major things that helped end it, down the road, the Dayton Accord signed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So these things, despite being halfway around the world, can really have a local impact as well. So it's worth watching too. Bangladesh is 170 million people inside the territory the size of the state of Florida. Think about that. And they are in the midst of some tumult. Syria's civil war has been ongoing since March of 2011. In Sudan, we don't hear a lot about Sudan in our news cycle. More people of Arab background have died in Sudan in the last year than in Gaza. It's not something you'll hear on the news cycle, but it's worth bearing in mind. Myanmar, a country in Southeast Asia, significant internal issues against the junta government, and then Ethiopia and East Africa as well. Potential for another Yugoslavia type situation. So, in terms of Ukraine, I'll spend a significant portion of today on Ukraine. But for those of you just wanting a quick refresher, following a large-scale military buildup that began around Thanksgiving, Russia does annual military exercises in different quadrants of its country, and so it's normal. We, the United States, conduct military exercises. Russia does the same thing. But their exercises were in the West, Zapad exercises, and they stayed. They kept a major troop presence there from Thanksgiving. It built up, and while many people said an invasion is unlikely, war in Europe is outdated, indeed, it's something that came up as well. Came back, that's nice. And so this has been an ongoing conflict. A lot of people interviewed me in the media, is this going to end soon? Is it going to be quick? And once it became internationalized, it was ongoing, and there is no immediate sight in end. This is where it gets interesting for the election cycle. Former President Trump has said, I'm going to go on day one, start negotiations, trying to end this. The Harris administration is likely to follow on from the Biden administration on all of this, but there is an interesting divergence. And so if we look at the kind of wider region, Russia is the largest country landmass in the world by size. Ukraine, you can see to its west, volatile part of the former Soviet Union that existed from the Union Treaty of 1922 to its dissolution in December of 1991. And we see Russia ongoing under President Putin, meddling in Ukraine. This is from 2014 in the aftermath of the Sochi Winter Olympics, when Russia illegally invaded Crimea, took that very important area. There's a naval base here. You can see Sevastopol that is hugely important. There's a lot of history to it. And then they went on to take portions of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. Oblasts are like states. There are 24 of them in Ukraine. And Putin has made the claim that Russia should occupy Ukraine, despite it having a distinct national identity, history, language, etc., all the types of things that tend to make up modern countries. And so in 2014, it was left here as a stalemate, as a quote-unquote frozen conflict. And then we saw a shock and awe campaign where Russia tried to take Ukraine within about 72 hours. You can see widespread bombing throughout different areas, but really pushed to capture Ukraine from the east. And so you can see this is from War Mapper from August the 1st of this year. And you can see in the purple, these are areas where Russia took, again, illegally in 2014. And the areas in red you see have been further developed. So into other areas of Donetsk, most of Luhansk, into Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, and then into Kharkiv as well. And you've also seen in recent months another short incursion around Kharkiv in the very east. Kharkiv is a city of about 1.4 million. It's the second largest in Ukraine, so it's very, very important. But in the lead up to this election, there's a significant change to policy under President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. In the last few days, there's been a reversal, and I don't know how many of you followed it, but it's one to watch. Ukrainian troops have actually reversed on Russian troops, and they've gone in and taken sections of a neighboring area. This is the Kursk Oblast of Russia. And so Ukraine has actually captured areas within Russia proper. And this is very interesting as it connects to our election here in the United States, because you may ask, okay, why is he doing that? And if, so there are several different reasons. One, though, is it will move troops from elsewhere, these areas, and force them to come up here further. and to try and defend. So Kursk is in here, and you see this is the region in which Ukrainian forces have actually gone into Russia, and will hypothetically move Russian troops from here up here, and then allowing Ukrainians to defend their territory and to gain it back. But the other line of thinking is that if there is a negotiation with a Trump victory and a desire to end the conflict, because anytime this simmers, there are real dangers of escalation, something becoming a NATO-Russia war, something like that can be very dangerous. And so the Ukrainians probably are looking at, well, if we can take portions of Russia and then there's a negotiation, we can simply swap it back. Because it's long been the question of Ukraine, well, how does this end? How do you actually get these pieces back? And now there is a pretty interesting answer to all of it, and we'll have to keep an eye on this. For greater context, I want you to look at this. And so this is the recent area of Russian incursion into Ukraine. And now likewise, Ukraine has gone into Russia. And so this is going to be an interesting one to watch as well. Switching to the Middle East, we have an ongoing major crisis. This is a place where the Trump campaign is really going to push back against the Harris campaign. The argument is when in January 2021, there were no major wars in the world. Under Biden's watch, we now have two big ones. And so that's the argument that the Trump campaign is going to use in order to try and shift the electoral college map in November. But if you want a quick refresher, we have a really brutal and heinous invasion of southern Israel by Hamas, a known terrorist organization that also governs the territory of Gaza. Some 1,200 Israelis were killed and their guests, including some American citizens, in some 22 villages and kibbutzim in the very, very south of Israel. But what's worth noting, one of the reasons why this conflict is ongoing is that there are 130 hostages that are still taken captive. So put yourself in the place of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. Do you stop the conflict without getting the hostages back? And that's a difficult one. Of course, this is a brutal conflict. The estimations are that some 40,000 Palestinians have died in Gaza in all of this. And as college campuses come back, this is a place, again, where we could see protests because there's an awful lot to this. There's a lot of complexity. If I share some personal cards, I'll say that from Netanyahu's standpoint, it's difficult to negotiate peace without getting the hostages back. And then to think about, well, if you allow Hamas to stay in the government, they're going to attack at some point in the future as well. But it's a very brutal humanitarian situation. But as I noted, bear in mind that more ethnic Arabs have died in Sudan than Palestine. So that is worth noting as well in terms of how we view things and what is disseminated in this. So if you look at a wider map, it's hard to actually pick out Israel even on a map of all of this. It's a very, very small landmass. It's about the size of New Jersey. And at its narrowest waistband, it's only 8 miles from the West Bank into to the Mediterranean. Gaza is a very, very small sliver. You see it here. You see the West Bank. These are 2 parts of the Palestinian territories. The Gaza Strip, though, is one of the most densely populated places on the planet. Prior to the war, 2.3 million people in that very, very small sliver. It's one of the reasons why the death toll in this conflict has been just so horrific and challenging with all of it. And so you can see Israel, the Israeli Defense Force has managed to take positions. The red dots are all indications of where they have encampments. They have tried to clear areas. They've tried to gain control. But like with Ukraine and Russia, there's no clear way that this ends. Because if you think about, well, what if Israel takes it, they end up occupying it indefinitely and then have to govern? That's a very, very difficult thing to do. And it's something that Israel did and then withdrew in 2005. It's not something they want to do. Others will simply say, well, why doesn't Egypt do something? It's a huge country. It's right next door. Egypt wants nothing to do with it because It's a very restive area. They have problems with ISIS in the Sinai Peninsula. Hamas has helped with that, and it would potentially have the peril of destabilizing Egypt. And so it's between a bit of a rock and a hard place, but yet it's going to land on the desk of the president one way or another in January 2025, whether it's Harris or Trump. This is a significant one. Well, it does get worse because there is a very real potential of a wider escalation. The lid has been kept on the boiling pot, so to speak, but there are real dangers beyond Hamas and Israel. If we look to the north of Israel, there is a country called Lebanon, and in the very, very south, Hezbollah, another terrorist organization, also serves in a governing faction in that area, and they have lobbed a few thousand rockets and missiles into northern Israel. This one has been bubbling for some time and could really engulf the wider region and could create a two-front war for Israel in the south here, but also in the north. And so this would be catastrophic because the spread would be very, very quick. Add to that, Turkey, a NATO ally, has threatened to actually invade Israel on the behalf of the Palestinians. And so you've got a NATO ally that has been active, very active in places like Syria, for example, testing its military might and actually threatening the Israeli government with military action. So you have Lebanon, you have Turkey, you have Iran-backed militias in both Iraq and Syria. And Mayor Adams was talking about our troops and helping veterans. This is an area where U.S. troops have been hit very, very hard. We have a number of bases still in Iraq. People from our community that have served in there. I was chatting with a former student that's deployed in the army in Kuwait right now, and there's just a growing and mounting threat surrounding Israel, but also U.S. and allied troops in this area. One to keep an eye on as well. In Yemen, which is in the midst of a civil war, Yemen is the country down here, the poorest in the region. There's another terrorist organization, Ansar Allah. You may know of these, but they too have been firing at Israel, causing problems with the United States in the Persian Gulf. And so you can see pretty quickly there is a toxic web of potential problems. Notably as well, in the West Bank, there's been a flare-up of violence in a region that really had been very calm over the course of the last 15 years. Typically, when the Middle East is discussed in our media, we tend to think of it's crazy or it's always in conflict. I was walking around in parts of the West Bank in 2018. People were very friendly. It was nice to get lunch, things of that nature. And there was a real camaraderie that was growing between Israelis and Palestinians. 140,000 Palestinians would cross daily into Israel to work. That has all gone backwards since October of 2023 in alarming ways, and violence has cropped up here. It's a very, very sad output of all of this. It's worth mentioning the Trump era Abraham Accords that really sought to develop a much greater peace. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco all signed on to that. And in addition to historic treaties with Jordan and Egypt in 1979, it looked like peace was actually growing in the Middle East. All of that is reversed, unfortunately. So major different conflicts here, and then ongoing civil wars in Yemen, Syria, Sudan, and Libya. And so as we think to the US presidential election, we have conflict here in Israel and Hamas, but terrorist organizations here, and interspersed in here and here, a government threatening to act as well, and then ongoing civil wars in Libya and Sudan and Syria among others. And bear in mind, Ukraine is only just up here. This is actually Crimea. And so there's a lot of potential turmoil that can land on the desk of a president in the near future. So a few conclusions as I wrap up, because I know I think I'm already over time. Forgive me, I'm a professor and a politician. I talk a lot. I think sometimes I preach every now and then, so that's like the triple whammy of I'm just talking way too much. What can we draw? How can we take it home? Well, it's interesting because for those of you that are political junkies like me, just like following this, Republicans led Democrats for a long period of time in the lead up to the campaign from November of 23, really up to this month in August. It's one of the reasons I think Biden was put out on the Democratic side and Harris put in. But it's as of today, the Harris campaign leads the Trump campaign by about 3% in a poll of polls. And so it's getting really, really tight. And something like foreign policy could swing this one way or another. I should also note that Republicans have a built-in electoral college advantage, and so can actually lose by about 2% and still win the electoral college. So 3% sounds like a sizable victory. It looks like Kamala Harris is on the march, and there's certainly a bump in the polls there. But it's also to say that Republicans can win elections. Notably, in 2000 and 2016, the Democrats won the popular vote, and yet Republicans won the White House. And so that tends to hold in terms of the way that the Electoral College is made up. It's finally also worth noting that Trump is notoriously undercounted in polling. Polls have tried to capture this and get better at it, but they still fall short. And so, for example, Clinton had a poll that is all the polls combined to one, 4% lead going into election day in November of 2016. She lost. She won the popular vote, but Trump won the Electoral College and therefore the keys to 1600 Pennsylvania Northwest. Biden had an 8.5% lead going into November of 2020 in the poll of polls, but only ended up winning by 4.5%. It was enough to win the Electoral College, but it also shows that Trump is notoriously undercounted. And so as we move in 81 days from today, both Ukraine and Israel, as I pointed out, there's a lot that's there in terms of foreign policy, something that could indeed shift the wider race. The two dominant nominees diverge really quite widely on both of these topics. Netanyahu and Trump are very, very close. When I was in Jerusalem, there's actually a site of a building that had the two of them together, and this was an advertisement for Likud, which is Netanyahu's political party. And then on Ukraine, Trump is pushing very heavily for a negotiation now. Harris will probably allow for the status quo to continue. I haven't asked her by the two nominees because Harris technically isn't the nominee yet. That still has to be done formally at the National Convention, which is coming up in the next few days. So thank you all for your attention, much appreciated. Happy to answer some questions. I'll mill around for a little bit afterwards. In the back, please.
Okay, so quick question. It'll take a long time. And how much does Biden stepping out of the race now, being a lame duck president, free him to reach negotiations both in Ukraine and in the Middle East and bring resolutions that might not have been popular for a sitting president?
Yeah, it's a great point because it is something with which he has latitude to do. And as I noted, there's a foreign policy legacy that can be much greater than a domestic legacy. I don't think he will approach it that way simply because he hasn't done so for the last 3.5 years. And I think what he's going to try and do is make his last moves domestically. But as you mentioned, he's a lame duck now, so it probably will curtail his power. But that'll be an interesting one to watch as December comes, January comes. What kind of final moves will he try to make to shore up the legacy? I'll keep an eye on that. Thanks. Mr. Cusack, please.
In the
in the Israeli conflict, it seems interesting that, seems like Hamas is not necessarily acting on behalf of the people they govern, right?
Exactly.
Kind of using them in a way as pawns. Then you have Israeli government. Netanyahu's not very popular, is he?
It's really like the United States, 50-50. So from 2018 to 2022, 4 years, there were 5 elections. And the reason why the 4 of them didn't lead to a larger government is because it was effectively tied. Netanyahu was in from 1996 to 1999. He was then out in the political wilderness for a decade, came back in 2009, governed all the way to 2021, and then was out for 18 months in the midst of one of these election campaigns. There were 2 other leaders, Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, that governed briefly in there. But then Netanyahu's Likud and its coalition won in 2022. He's back. And so he has enough of a buffer to hold off for another election cycle. But it is really 50-50, pro-Netanyahu, anti-Netanyahu in Israel. And this is in a system that's hugely, hugely complex. There are dozens of political parties that run.
If you consider the US as a third actor, it seems odd that all 3 actors or factions have divide about the conflict and the circumstances about it. It's odd.
And with Hamas too, they did technically win the election in 2006, but they still have not held another election since then. So that tells us something as well. But that should make our hearts grieve as well. 2.3 million people in a very, very small area. They don't get a chance to pick their government, and they're in the midst of a very tough war. Mr. Browns, please.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting. What about the Saudis? They're big, they're strong, they're wealthy.
Great point.
Supposedly allies. Are they in the same situation as Egypt where they just don't want to, they have more to lose in the game?
That's it. It's a wonderful question. So let's dig into Saudi Arabia. So it's a big country on its surface. It's wealthy in terms of money. It's hosting more and more world stage events. The 20, I was called a soccer nerd or soccer something. 2034, they're hosting the FIFA World Cup. So the world is coming to Saudi Arabia in this time. They have an aging octogenarian king, King Salman, who's really not in control all that much. His son, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, you may have seen, was reportedly cozying up to Israel to sign on to the Abraham Accords. So you have the UAE, you have Bahrain, you have Morocco, which is over here, Sudan, all signing. Looks like there'll be greater peace in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, the big player among Sunni Muslims, is beginning to cozy up to Israel. Again, they want to host the world, so they want to be a much more open Saudi Arabia than they've been in the past. But Saudi Arabia has very much backed away from Israel in the aftermath of October the 7th. And they still hold a lot of cards, but they haven't really led negotiations like Qatar or Qatar here. And so it's one where I think there's lucky that's sitting on the sidelines waiting a little bit, but they do want to protect their status quo. I don't think they're have any major animosity towards Israel, but they've really backed off in terms of signing on to the Abraham Accords.
Thank you.
For your time remaining there, Glenn will stick around, so if you have some more questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. Thank you very much, Glenn. You know, I went to the high school last week for the opening day and almost wanted to go back to school. With teachers like this, you're good, but I'd love to have a teacher like Glenn, so thank you, Glenn. And as is our habit, we always give a book to the library, signed by Glenn. This one's called Dear Teacher. Next week's meeting, Amy Ferguson from Michael's House will be here. That should be another interesting program. Our greeters next week are Alex Harriet and Jeffrey Urita. And keep your eyes open for any upcoming events through beavercreekrotary.com on our Facebook page. If anyone is interested in going to the Invite a Vet dinner, please let me know so I can get your name on the list, because it is filling up. Veterans are free and their spouses are free. So anything else for the good of the club? You'd all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and strong. Again, have a great weekend.
Guys, have a good week. Ciao, buddy. Have a great morning. They're, it's not through, I'm shut up. Shit. Let's stand. You know, you want to get in the